Okay, so welcome back to all of you guys. We're going to move into this next topic of what is enlightenment so that you guys can understand this particular topic. Understanding what is enlightenment is very helpful because if you're going to make your way to somewhere, you would like to know what that thing is so that you can then more easily navigate your way to it. And then once you arrive, you actually know that you're there, right? So by understanding what is enlightenment, it's going to actually help you to be able to actually attain enlightenment. So I'm going to share with you guys what this is so that then you can learn it and more easily navigate your way to it. As I'm sharing this topic with you, it's important to understand that at the end of our conversation, you're going to know plenty more about enlightenment than you do right now, but you're not going to know everything there is to know about what enlightenment is, because it's kind of like if you've never tasted chocolate ice cream before, and I was to sit here and describe to you what chocolate ice cream tastes like. At the end of our conversation, you'd know more about what chocolate ice cream tastes like, but you wouldn't fully know what it tastes like until you actually taste it yourself. So getting to enlightenment, you'll be able to understand here in our discussion more about enlightenment, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're starting to experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment. But as we go, I'm going to be pausing a few times, and you guys can ask any and all questions that you like. Remember, you have the microphones here, and then for those of you guys online, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom electronically, unmute your microphone, and ask any and all questions that you like that way. So what enlightenment is it's a mental state that you attain in this life or at death, where the mind is completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. By the time you get to enlightenment, your mind is unshakable, it's steady, it's stable. You'll have focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory in the mind. You'll no longer experience any discontent feelings. You will have eliminated all your anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of this can be eliminated from the mind by purifying the mind. Oftentimes people think that these feelings are caused by something external, but it's actually being caused by something that's inside your own mind. There's certain pollutions that the Buddha discovered. I'm going to introduce you to those here in a moment. They're called the 10 fetters. There's 10 individual pollutions that the mind has. And when you purify the mind of these pollutions, that's where the mind is then experiencing enlightenment. So the way that you might think about this is, yes, that the mind is attaining enlightenment. Some people talk about it that way, but you might also think about it as like the mind is already enlightened, but you have these pollutions in the way that are hindering you from being able to experience the qualities of enlightenment. It's kind of like there's the sun and there's the clouds that are in front of the sun, and you can't experience the rays of the sun because the clouds are blocking that. But when you get the clouds out of the way, slowly but surely the rays of the sun will start shining through more and more and more. But the difference here is that when you get the clouds out of the way, they're going to eventually come back. But for an enlightened mind, when you get the pollutions out of the mind, they will never come back. That the mind is permanently in that mental state. It's a permanent mental state that you'll be experiencing for the rest of your life, where the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy. So by the time you get to enlightenment, the mind is unshakable. It's steady, it's stable. The mind is calm and relaxed, but yet attentive and alert. Oftentimes when we think calm and relaxed, we think like, oh man, I'm so calm, so relaxed, and the mind's kind of turned off. That's not what the enlightened mind is experiencing. The mind in the enlightened mental state is calm and relaxed, but it's crisp, it's attentive, it's alert, that the mind has been trained and honed, that it doesn't have those pollutions of the mind any longer. So by the time you get to enlightenment, not only are you experiencing some of these benefits, and we'll talk about some more here in a bit, but by the time you get to enlightenment, you're also no longer going to experience rebirth. Now, you guys heard me share at the beginning that none of the teachings of the Buddha are based in belief, including the cycle of rebirth. Right now, you might not have the wisdom of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth, but that's something that you can learn in the future, that you can independently verify this cycle. I have 17 different criteria in our book series. In volume 11, chapter 105, you'll see 17 different criteria of how to independently verify the cycle of rebirth. Right now, you might be believing that you only have one life. but you don't have any evidence of that, other than the fact that right now you can't remember your past lives. But as you're training your mind and you're uprooting this pollution out of your mind, there's the potential that you might observe memories from your past lives. And this is one of the ways that people independently verify the cycle of rebirth. But that's usually something that you just kind of set aside when you first start on the path to enlightenment. You don't really focus on it. That's why it's in volume 11, chapter 105, because that's about 2 years into your development that you ultimately will maybe get to that point. So the cycle of rebirth is something that the Buddha taught, and you're going to hear me kind of mention it here and there, but I don't really go into a lot of detail in this program because as a foundation on the path to enlightenment, you really don't need to approach the cycle of rebirth early in your journey to enlightenment. But just understand it is something that the Buddha taught, and it can be independently verified. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you will no longer experience continuous rebirth. You will have escaped out of that continuous rebirth. So this is the mental state of enlightenment. And the way that the mind's getting to this is through purification of the mind. As I mentioned, you're eliminating what's called craving, anger, and ignorance. This is a high-level way of referring to the pollution of the mind. You're going to learn about this on Wednesday morning. I'm going to teach this called the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots or the 3 fires. And I'll help you to be able to understand what those are in more detail on Wednesday morning. But the mind would have been purified of those pollutions. And that's what's producing the enlightened mental state. So while enlightenment itself is a mental state, the path to enlightenment is a journey of growing, learning, and developing to purify your mind. Essentially, you're becoming a better and better human being. That in the unenlightened state, when the mind's polluted, a human being functions very much like an animal. Some people call human beings an animal, but we're not an animal. We're a human being. We function very differently than animals. Animals aren't able to cultivate their consciousness or their mind to the same level as a human being. A human being, we can cultivate our consciousness to the point of enlightenment. So we are not animals, but in the unenlightened state, when our mind is polluted, we function very much like animals. So what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is as you're purifying your mind, you're becoming a better and better human being, functioning through this higher consciousness or this higher mind, where you have wisdom about the world around you and you're making wise decisions about how you interact in the world. So while enlightenment is the mental state, the path to enlightenment is the journey of growing, learning, and developing, doing this inner work of purifying your mind and becoming a better and better human being. Enlightenment is not happiness. While there is plenty of happiness as part of the enlightened mental state, I don't describe it that way because you understand what happiness is like. When you experience happiness, like say, maybe you got a raise at work and your boss is giving you an extra $20,000 a year. I'm so happy. Oh my gosh, this is great. I got more money. Yay. Or maybe you bought a new house. Yay, I got a new house or a new car. Or, well, I'm going to go to Thailand. I can't wait to get to Thailand. This is going to be so fun. Right? That's happiness that you're used to. That's called conditional happiness. We're going to talk about this tomorrow where you'll learn more about what conditional happiness is. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're experiencing unconditional happiness, where the mind is bright and cheerful and glad and uplifted. And it's a permanent mental state that there doesn't need to be any condition met in order to experience that. Where that other happiness that I was talking about, conditional happiness, there needs to be some condition. Boss gives you a raise, I'm now happy. That's the condition, right? Or it's sunny outside. Now you're happy. Or you're going to Thailand. Now I'm happy. There's some condition that needs to be met in order for that happiness to be there. By the time you get to enlightenment, there doesn't need to be any condition met. You can just be happy all the time. But it's not that bouncing off the walls excitement happiness. It's where the mind is cheerful and bright and glad and uplifted at all times. So there's some people that will describe enlightenment as happiness or ultimate bliss. You might hear this. What they're typically referring to is something called the jhanas. You're going to learn about 4 stages of enlightenment. And before you get to these 4 stages of enlightenment, there's something called the jhanas. These are preliminary phases that the mind goes through on its way to the first stage of enlightenment. And when you get to that first jhana, where you're experiencing enhanced qualities of mind in these phases, oftentimes there's an ultimate bliss. There's this bliss or this excitement that comes into the mind. And if it's like night and day compared to what you were experiencing when you were off the path to enlightenment to when you were in these jhanas, that your mind is excited. You have this bliss that's in the mind, because these jhanas, they're enhanced qualities of mind that you need to cultivate on your way to enlightenment. And by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you will have experienced 4 phases that the mind goes through, referred to as the jhanas. So sometimes when people are experiencing these jhanas, it's like night and day for what they were experiencing when they were off the path to enlightenment to when they were in these jhanas. And because there's this ultimate bliss, people think they're actually enlightened at that point. And that's why they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. So if you ever hear somebody say that an enlightened being still experiences sadness, anger, frustration, and all these other feelings, that's because that individual thinks that they're enlightened and they're experiencing the anger and sadness and frustration, and they're describing what they're experiencing as enlightenment. And more likely than not, what they're experiencing is the jhanas, if they're talking about it as ultimate bliss. But in reality, they're not experiencing enlightenment, because I can assure you that an enlightened being doesn't experience any anger, sadness, frustration, and all these other feelings. But if somebody's in the jhanas, they're still going to be experiencing those feelings. And because it's like night and day from what they were experiencing when they're off the path to enlightenment, they might actually think they're enlightened when they're in the jhanas, but they're not yet enlightened. So this is where sometimes people will describe enlightenment as ultimate bliss. So by the time you get to enlightenment, you're beyond this up and down that the mind does. The mind is permanently peaceful and joyful. So I don't describe enlightenment as happiness, even though there's plenty of happiness and joy in the enlightened mental state. It's just that it's unconditioned happiness and unconditioned joy, where there doesn't need to be any condition met for you to actually experience that. You will wake up in the morning joyful. All day long, you will be joyful, and you will go to sleep joyful. That's not the way that an unenlightened being experiences the world, but an enlightened being experiences the world that way, that everything is joyful. The mind is cheerful and bright, glad, and uplifted. So this is what enlightenment is. The advantages of enlightenment is that the mind's completely peaceful, calm, serene, and content with joy, that your mind is no longer experiencing any of these discontent feelings. This is a list of feelings that you'll probably hear me repeat over and over and over again as you study with me, because the mind doesn't experience any of these feelings. By the time you've gotten to enlightenment, you've purified the mind of the causes and conditions that are producing those. Those are the 10 fetters, the pollutions, which I'm going to introduce you to here in a moment. And because you've eradicated these pollutions out of the mind, not only will you no longer experience these discontent feelings, but you'll notice that the mind has a high degree of focus, concentration, clarity, and deep memory, because the mind's now performing optimally. Where when you had these pollutions in the mind can't perform optimally. That's why you're lacking concentration or focus or clarity. And then some people think that they have ADHD or ADD or things like that. And it's just that the mind is not trained. It's unpurified. It hasn't been fully trained yet. So when you train your mind, you'll notice that your mind is experiencing these qualities. You'll notice that you have deep wisdom about the world around you, and you'll be able to be polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to everybody. Where right now, this might be challenging for you. If people do things the way you like and the way you want, you probably can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with them. But if people don't do things your way, or you get angry or frustrated, you might be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. That's what the unenlightened mind does. But the enlightened mind understands how unwise that is to be impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful. Because if you put that out, that's what's going to come back to you. So by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind has been fully trained that you can be polite, kind, friendly, respectful with everybody. Whether you agree with them or you disagree with them, you're not going to have bitterness and harshness and hostility in your mind. You're not going to be argumentative where you're arguing with people. So because of that, an individual is not causing any harm. You're not causing any harm in the world by the time you get to enlightenment. And you'll notice that your personal and professional relationships are really blossoming, that they're at ease. Because as long as you're being bitter and harsh and hostile in your relationships, all that's just going to come back to you. You can look at the relationships that you're struggling in. When you're bitter and harsh and hostile, it just all comes back to you. But when you purify your mind and you train your mind to no longer do that, slowly but surely, you'll see these relationships improve. Sometimes we think the way to improve a relationship is to change the other person. That's sometimes what people do. But that's not the way that you're going to get to peace and joy, by changing other people, because there's 8 billion people in the world. You can't train 8 billion people to do things your way, but you can train your mind to learn how to be loving and kind and warm and gentle in each of these situations. And when you're putting that out more and more, that's what will come back to you. By the time you get to enlightenment, you don't even have a bad mood anymore. It's physically impossible for you to experience a bad mood by the time you get to enlightenment. And this comes through training of the mind. The way that you do this is you start with these teachings, and you're going to be learning pretty much all of these in this course, that these are the foundational teachings to be able to make your way to enlightenment. There's things beyond this that you would need to learn in order to get to enlightenment, but this is where you get started. You learn the 3 universal truths, the 4 noble truths, the Eightfold Path, and the 5 precepts. You're going to learn all of that as part of this class. You're not going to master it by the end of this class, but you'll at least learn it, and you'll start being able to develop it. You're also going to need to learn what's called the Brahma Viharas. These are 4 healthy mental states. I don't actually teach it in this course. I teach it in the next course, which is called Harmony in Relationships. I'm going to be teaching that in February, and I've recorded it many times. So if you're not here, I live stream it and you can watch the recordings. I'll at least be referring to these as part of this course, but I won't be teaching it specifically. It's in this book in chapter 14, so you can see it there. But these are 4 healthy mental states that's going to antidote certain issues in your mind. This is where the Buddha helps you to be able to see certain symptoms that you're having in your mind, and then he gives you a prescription or an antidote. This is where the Buddha gets the reputation of being like a doctor. But you are your own best doctor, because if you see the symptoms coming up in your mind, then you can apply the prescription, which is one of these 4 healthy mental states, referred to as the Brahma Viharas. The 10 fetters is something that you're going to need to know. I'm going to introduce you to that here in a moment. You're going to need to learn the 7 factors of enlightenment, and then you're going to need extensive meditation training. This is where you get started. And when you're learning these teachings to just get started, you're not believing them. Remember, you're learning, examining, and investigating. You're reflecting to independently verify them, and then you're practicing them. And that's what's actually going to lead to the real improvement, because now you're cultivating wisdom about how your mind works. One of the ways to think about the Buddha is he was like the world's foremost expert on mental health. He was a forefront in training the mind, because he took human psychology and he boiled it down to a common language that every human being can understand. And now when you understand that, now you can practice and train your mind to get to the point where you're experiencing these enlightened mental state. And this is the first collection of teachings that you need to be able to understand that. So do you guys have any questions up to this point of anything I've been sharing so far? No questions? Let me see if we have anything online here. Okay. So I don't see any questions online either. All right. So what I'm going to do then now is I'm going to introduce you to the 10 fetters, because everything the Buddha is teaching you is to help you purify the mind of these 10 fetters. This is the pollution. This is the clouds that are in front of the sun. And when you peel this away and you get rid of these pollutions out of the mind, that's where the qualities of enlightenment start shining through more and more and more. So I'm going to introduce you to what these are. But then in other programs, I actually spend a lot of time on each one of these. But at the beginning of your journey on the path to enlightenment in a foundational course like this, you don't really need to know the ins and outs of these right now. You just need kind of a basic exposure to them. But in the future, I spend about an hour to an hour and a half talking about each one of these and other programs that I share. So for now, I'm just going to introduce you to what they are so that you can understand this is the underlying thing that's causing all the difficulties and struggles in your life. And everything the Buddha taught in one way or another is helping you to eradicate these out of the mind. The Buddha referred to these as fetters, because during the lifetime of the Buddha, if you were someone that they were trying to keep confined to a certain area, like a criminal, they would attach a fetter to your ankle. What a fetter is a shackle and a chain and a ball. and they would just keep you in this field, and that's how you would stay confined. Where today we put prisoners in jail cells, but during the lifetime of the Buddha, they would attach a fetter around your ankle, this shackle, chain, and ball. So when he discovers these 10 pollutions, he calls them fetters because it's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state where it keeps experiencing these discontent feelings over and over and over again. So it, just like the prisoner, when you release the fetter off of the ankle, the prisoner is now free. It's the same thing about the mind, that if you release this fetters out of the mind and you eradicate them, the mind is now free, because your mind is not free in the unenlightened state. If somebody says something disrespectful to you, your mind's going to get angry and frustrated, agitated, or annoyed because your mind is not free. But when you get to the point where your mind's been purified, it's now free because you've released these 10 fetters and eliminated them out of the mind. So sometimes people refer to these as the taints or the pollutions or the defilements. These are other ways that you'll hear people refer to them as. So the first one here is personal existence view. What this one is where the mind has confusion and misunderstanding, that it thinks that this body is you or this mind is you. The mind will cling to a self-image or a self-identity, wanting people to perceive you in a certain way. And you can only be happy when people are perceiving you in a certain way. So if you ever went to like a social situation and you spilled something on your clothing and you got embarrassed in that situation, that was your personal existence view. You were clinging to this self-image, wanting other people to perceive you a certain way, and you could only be happy when they were perceiving you in that way. And when they weren't perceiving you in that way, you were embarrassed. Or say you ever went in front of a mirror and you saw a pimple or a wrinkle or a mole, or you saw that you had gray hair, or you were losing your hair, and you looked in the mirror and you were shaken up by that. That's your personal existence view. The mind's clinging to this body, wanting to be perceived a certain way, and you can only feel happy when you're being perceived that way. Or say you were like me when I was a kid. I used to get out the gel and the mousse and I would run it through my hair, trying to get every little hair in exactly the right spot. And I couldn't go to school until I had every little hair in exactly the right spot. And sometimes I would do this so much that I would actually miss the school bus on the way to school. Right? So if you did those kinds of things, that's your personal existence view. Or say you were like go to in front of your clothes, like in the closet, and you're thinking, who am I going to see today? And how do I want to appear? What clothes do I want to wear? And now maybe you put on some clothes and you looked in the mirror and you're like, no, that's not it. And you put on some other clothes. And you're like, no, that's not it. And you put on some other clothes. You're like, all right, now I feel comfortable to go outside. This is your personal existence view, wanting to be perceived by others in a certain way. And this is hindering your mind from experiencing complete peace and complete joy, because you can only be happy when you're being perceived the way you want. And this body is not permanent. So if you cling to this body, wanting it to appear a certain way permanently, when you're not appearing that way, you're going to experience discontentedness. So that's the self-image part of the personal existence view. The other part is the self-identity. This is like your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation. You might cling to any number of this stuff as who you think you are as a person. And now you can only feel happy when those things are intact. So say, for example, you're at a restaurant and you're thinking, I am American, or I am Japanese, I am Chinese, I am a Brit, I am an Aussie, I am Canadian, I am this, I am that. Any of that I am, that is your self-identity. Well, if you're at a restaurant and 2 tables over, they say, all Americans are lovely and kind and warm and gentle. I've never heard anybody say this, but maybe they might say this, right? And if you identify with I am American, now you're like, they're talking about me. And you get all these pleasant feelings, right? But then 2 tables over, somebody says something degrading or disparaging about Americans or whatever identity you're holding on to in your mind. Now you're going to be angry and frustrated. So if you have this personal existence view in your mind around your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, or job or occupation, or any number of things, you're going to experience discontentedness. So say, for example, that you were a police officer and your mind identified with, I am a police officer. Well, as long as you're doing that job, you feel great. But now when you lose your job, maybe you get injured, you retire, maybe you get fired and you can't do the job anymore. You're driving a taxi and your mind's identifying with, I am a police officer. And now you're disgruntled and agitated because you're not able to do that work. Or maybe you were in a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you identify with, I am a boyfriend, I am a girlfriend. And as long as you guys were in a relationship, there was a certain amount of comfort with that. But when you guys broke up and now you're single, your mind doesn't identify that way. And you might have felt like you wanted to hurry up and get right back into another relationship. And you felt like that was going to solve the problem because you didn't feel comfortable in this single, right? Your mind didn't identify that way. It identified with, I am a boyfriend, I'm a girlfriend, I'm a husband, I'm a wife. And now when you're single, your mind was uncomfortable with that. And it felt like the way to solve that problem was to hurry up and get back into another relationship so you could affirm that role, that identity in your mind. But the underlying problem is this personal existence view, this pollution. So the Buddha teaches you to eradicate this and get this out of the mind. And we're going to talk about this more tomorrow as well. Then there's something called doubt. What doubt is where you have doubt about the Buddha, the teachings, the community that you're part of, your teacher, or your own ability to get to enlightenment. If you have doubt, it will hinder you or block you from being able to get to enlightenment. And right now, you probably have doubt. That's normal. People have doubt. But you don't eliminate your doubt through blind belief or faith. That's not how you eliminate your doubt. The way to eliminate your doubt is to investigate the teachings, examine the teachings. When you investigate and examine the teachings, and then you reflect on them to verify whether they're true or false, and then you practice them, integrating them into your day-to-day life, and you see that they're actually working to improve the condition of your mind in your life, eventually you'll get to the point where you have no doubt about these teachings because you will have seen enough progress and enough improvement to the condition of your mind in your life. But initially, when you first get on the path, there's a good chance that you actually have doubt because you don't even know the teachings of the Buddha. How could you not have doubt in them if you don't even know what they are? So that's why you eliminate your doubt through investigation and examination of the teachings. And ultimately, you'll be able to independently verify that they're true. So that's why where you see that what I'm teaching you is opposite of what you currently think about the world, rather than just continue to think about those things in the way that you think about it, ask questions and get help so that you can then learn through investigation and examination of the teachings. And more, you can eliminate your doubt. So what you can do with your doubt is you can actually harness it. You can turn this into an inquisitive mind. Let's just say right now, you might say to yourself that you doubt the teachings of the Buddha. If you do, that's fine, right? You can admit that to yourself, that you doubt the teachings of the Buddha. And you might say, yeah, I doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know. This isn't me speaking. This is me pretending to be someone else. I know his teachings lead exactly where he said they do. But let's just say a student says, yes, I doubt the teachings of the Buddha. I don't know whether or not they lead to enlightenment or not. But you know what? I'm going to roll up my sleeves, I'm going to sink my teeth in, and I'm going to turn this into an inquisitive mind. I'm going to investigate this and examine it to determine whether or not they lead to enlightenment or not. And that's how you're going to eliminate your doubt, is turn it into an inquisitive mind where you now harness that doubt to actually be a motivator to allow you to be able to learn and investigate and examine his teachings. Because if you do that, you'll eventually get to the point where you've eliminated your doubt, because these teachings absolutely will work to help you improve the condition of your mind in your life. So that's what doubt is. Then there's something called wrong behavior in observances. There's two aspects of this. The first part of this is the wrong behavior part. In the unenlightened state, because the mind is polluted, there tends to be a certain amount of unwise moral conduct. And as long as you're putting out this unwise moral conduct, then you're going to have unwholesome things coming back to you. It's kind of like a pipe has bursted and there's oil spewing all over the world. Well, as long as there's oil spewing all over the world, you're going to have a real mess to clean up. And it's the same thing about your moral conduct. As long as you're being bitter and harsh and hostile to people through your moral conduct, you're causing harm in the world, and this is all going to come back to you. It's going to damage your relationships, and you're going to see that all that stuff's going to come back to you. So by the time that you've eliminated the wrong behavior, you will have cleaned up a certain amount of your moral conduct where you're no longer being bitter bitter and harsh and hostile to a certain degree, practicing what's called the Eightfold Path. There's a moral conduct section of this that I'm going to teach you tomorrow, which is called right speech, right action, and right livelihood. By the time you eliminate this portion of the fetter, you will have eliminated your practice of wrong speech, wrong action, and wrong livelihood. You will now be practicing right speech, right action, and right livelihood. So you'll understand more about what that is tomorrow. But you will have improved your moral conduct, and because of this, you'll see significant improvements to the condition of your mind and the way that people interact with you, because you're now improved the way that you interact with others. Then there's something called wrong observances. What wrong observances is that if somebody has the belief that rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this are going to lead to some kind of beneficial results in your life, then they're not understanding the true problem that the Buddha discovered. What the Buddha actually discovered is that the mind lacks wisdom, that it has this unknowing of true reality. It has confusion or misunderstanding. And the way to improve the condition of your mind in your life is to be able to cultivate wisdom. And there's no amount of rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things like this that will allow you to cultivate wisdom. So if I sit here and sprinkle water on you, or I tie strings on your wrist, or do other things like this is a rite, ritual, ceremony, worship. And that's not going to help you to cultivate wisdom. But you'll see plenty of these kinds of things in the Buddhist world because people aren't studying with his original teachings, and they don't understand that he never taught rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer. So if an individual thinks in their mind that they can just go to a building, have somebody sprinkle water on them, and then their life's going to get better, then they don't understand what the real problem is that the mind's lacking wisdom, and they need to cultivate wisdom. So whether you choose to do these things or not is a choice for you to make. Nobody's going to tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing in your life. The Buddha is instead just helping you to understand these natural laws. Because maybe you're getting together with your family and they're going out to an event. Maybe they're going to the church or the synagogue or the mosque or the temple. And as part of that, maybe they're going to do some rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and things of this nature. And maybe you're there hanging out with them. But if your mind understands that these rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, and prayer isn't leading to wisdom and the cultivation of your mind in your life, then you will have eliminated wrong observances. And oftentimes people have already eliminated that before they ever come and study with me, because they know that I don't do these things. And maybe they've done those things enough in other places, and they see that it didn't actually work to improve their life, and that's why they're looking for something new. So perhaps you've already done those things enough, and you realize that it doesn't lead to improvement in your day-to-day life, because you won't find me doing rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or things of that nature, because it doesn't help you to cultivate wisdom. The Buddha is teaching you how to train your mind and uproot these pollutions, and there's no amount of rituals or ceremonies that I could do that's going to help you to cultivate wisdom. So that's what the wrong observances are. Then there's something called sensual desire. Sensual desire is where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. So your sense bases are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. The Buddha describes the mind as the sixth sense base. So what the mind is doing is it's having this craving for permanently agreeable contact. So if you see something that is agreeable to you, you will get pleasant feelings. But if you see something that is disagreeable to you, you will get painful feelings. Or the same thing is happening with the ear. Like say you're at a stoplight and somebody pulls up to you with a certain type of music. You're like, whoa, that's my jam. All right, party, party, party. Let's dance, dance, dance. You get so happy and excited about that, right? That's because you're having contact through the ears that is agreeable to you. You're hearing this sound that is agreeable to you. But now you pull up to another traffic light and somebody else pulls up to you with a different type of music, and you don't listen to this kind of music, and you're like, oh, that's horrible. That's the worst music ever. And you're disgruntled and agitated. That's because of your sensual desire. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact through the ears when the world around you is not permanent. So this sensual desire, the mind can only be happy when it's getting agreeable contact. Here's another example. Say you're walking down the street and you smell a flower shop. You walk past the flower shop and you smell the odor of the flowers coming out. You might be like, oh, wow, that is such a beautiful odor. Oh my gosh, I really like that a lot. But now you walk a few more steps and you get a whiff of the sewer. and you're repulsed by it. Ah, that's horrible. That's the central desire. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and the mind itself. So the mind can have longing, yearning for things in the past. Say you're thinking about certain pleasant things or painful things that happened to you in the past. In the present moment, you can experience either pleasant or painful feelings based on things that you're thinking about from the past. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body. It's just that the mind is thinking about things in the past, and now in the present moment, you're experiencing pleasant or painful feelings based on things that happened in the past. The mind can do that with the future too. You can be thinking about the future and either have pleasant or painful feelings just through the mind, that there's no contact through the sense bases. So that's why the Buddha describes the mind as a sixth sense base, because the mind is longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact, and you don't get that because you live in an impermanent world. So when this central desire is in there, you'll experience discontentedness. When we talk about craving, desire, attachment, wants and expectations, we're talking about central desire. That's what we're talking about mostly. But there's other types of cravings, desires, attachments besides those. So when the mind's getting what it wants and its central desires are being satisfied, that's where you'll get pleasant feelings. But then when you're not getting what your mind wants, then you'll experience painful feelings. And one of the things that can arise is ill will. Bitterness, harshness, hostility, aggression towards others. This is something that is in the unenlightened mind, that this arises due to the central desire not getting fulfilled. That if the mind gets what it wants, it's happy. But if it doesn't get what it wants, that ill will arise, and there's bitterness and harshness and hostility. And now you're damaging your relationships. And when this ill will is arising, the mind will firmly believe it's coming from something external. You will think that your anger and frustration is being caused by other people. And what you'll tend to do is push people away. You'll be bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or you'll put your expectations on people and try to control them and pressure them into doing things your way. And this is the mind trying to get its central desires fulfilled. So these are the first 5 fetters. Do you guys have any questions on any of these? Yes, ma'am. Sure. Please. Help yourself to a microphone. Yeah, just press the gray button. It just takes a second or two to engage, and then you'll be able to talk. They're Buddhist microphones. You need to be patient with them.
So all the desires and, let's say, dreams are coming from the mind. Are there certain dreams coming from the heart?
The heart is just an organ that pumps blood through the body. We tend to talk about the heart in terms of emotion and love and things like this. But truly, the heart is just an organ that pumps blood through the body. When the Buddha talks about the mind, he talks about it as the heart. Where some people, like here in Thailand, they think the mind resides inside the heart, where in the West, we tend to point to the head when we talk about the mind. There's other cultures that think about the mind as being external and outside the body. In reality, it's not physical, it's not tangible, so there's no physical place that the mind can exist because it's not physical. And even if we knew where it existed, it doesn't really matter because you still need to train it and you still need to purify it. But it's not the heart that is producing dreams or anything like that. All of that is occurring inside the mind.
So when we have creative ideas or some desire to go and follow these creative ideas, so everything is created in the mind. Yeah. It's not like some people say, well, this is my soul's calling or my heart's desire or my dream.
Yeah, that's part of the lack of wisdom that the mind has, that it talks about those kinds of things, not really truly seeing true reality. True reality is that the mind is like the CPU of the computer. The computer has a central processing unit, and everything goes through that CPU. And if the CPU is not doing well, it's not functioning well, the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, all of that stuff doesn't function well. So the same thing is true about this being, that there is a physical body, but the mind is the central processing unit. Everything you experience comes through the mind. Now you have these doorways. The doorways are the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. That's the doorway that you're taking contact in, and the mind is now processing that. So everything is happening through the mind. The Buddha didn't teach that there is a soul or that there isn't a soul. He left it as an undeclared teaching. So whenever you hear people talk about a soul in relationship to his teachings, they haven't penetrated deeply enough to see that he never taught that. But that's what sometimes people will talk about is the soul, or they will talk about their intuition, or they will talk about things coming from their heart, or they will talk about this entity of the universe is guiding them and all these kinds of things. This is all unknowing of true reality. Everything that you're experiencing is happening within your mind. And that's why if you purify your mind, you'll get to the point where life is so peaceful and so joyful. If it was outside sources that were influencing what you experience on a day-to-day basis, you'd never be able to get to enlightenment because you can't change those other sources, those other entities. But if you purify your mind, you can get to peace and joy because everything's going through your mind. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
I was curious also about the sensual desires and the mind basically developing our feelings, I think is how I understand it. Is that not a good thing? Because sometimes if I wake up and I'm not in, I'm a bit down, I recognize that that's because of my thoughts. And so I'll try and think of different, more uplifting thoughts, and then it can pull me out and I'm in a totally different state. Mm-hmm. And I can go about my day in a much more, useful way. Mm-hmm. Is that not a good thing? Is the aim to kind of nullify everything, or?
It's best to not think of it as good or bad, because that's kind of like looking at it and trying to judge whether this is good or bad. Instead, whenever you're having what you're describing, which is conditioned feelings that based on some condition, mm-hmm. you're experiencing, let's just say grumpy or irritability. Let's just say somebody slept and they woke up, they were wanting 8 hours of sleep, but they only got 6 hours. And now when they wake up, they're grumpy and irritable. And now that irritability is something that the mind is having as a condition based on its sensual desire, because it was longing, yearning for this. And now because of that, that's great that you notice it and you change your thoughts to become more bright and uplifted. That's what you're doing on the path to enlightenment. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you won't experience that. If you were thinking you were going to get 8 hours and you fall asleep and you wake up and you only had 6, your mind wouldn't be grumpy and irritable. So it's not that the feelings are bad or not good. It's just that as long as you allow the mind to continue to form its inner feelings based on some condition, then you can't experience permanent peace and permanent joy, because it's only a matter of time before you experience impermanence. So as soon as you have a central desire, as soon as you crave something here, you're not going to get that all the time, because we live in an impermanent world. So you're kind of sabotaging your ability to be permanently happy and peaceful, because your mind is kind of having this expectation of, I want this. And now when you fall short of that, your mind's going to be disgruntled or irritated. So it's not about what's good or bad. It's just helping you to be able to see that conditioned feelings are leading the mind towards this being shaken up. Where oftentimes people think about emotions and feelings as something good, right? Like they might even say that person has such passion and, they're so ignited or something like this, where you can learn how to come to the middle where you're not chasing and having all this fiery passion. Because if you're not doing that, what the unenlightened mind typically does is it swings to the other side where it's dull and lethargic and complacent. And either of those two sides, you can't experience permanent peace and permanent joy. So the Buddha is teaching you to come to the middle where you can gradually pursue things as a goal, objective, or interest. And now your mind can be bright and cheerful and uplifted all the time. So as long as your mind has sensual desire, you can't be bright and cheerful, uplifted all the time, because your sensual desires want things a certain way. When it's sunny outside, you'll be happy. When it's raining, you'll be sad. When your bank account balance is here, you'll be happy. When it's down here, you'll be sad. And all this is change. So as soon as your mind has these central desires, which every unenlightened mind has, you're kind of sabotaging your ability to be permanently peaceful. So by eliminating this out of the mind, where you're pursuing things as a goal, objective, or interest with enthusiasm and ambition, then you're actually able to experience permanent peace and permanent joy.
Okay, keep work on it. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think we have more questions here, right? You guys have questions? Yeah, if you could get a microphone.
So I just had a quick question. Like, let's say you kind of reduce your better, what is your motivation after that? Like, when you're in the middle way, you're not seeking, you're not desiring too much. You're kind of at peace and a happy, joyful. What is your motivation in life after that? Like, you kind of go to your true self or your inner child kind of thing, and you kind of pursue something like that from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand what you're asking. So what motivates you when you're in this middle way is your wise decision making. Where over here, when you're chasing, you can only go forward with those things as long as you have that burning desire, that craving. And that craving, that central desire, it'll burn out eventually. And that's where your mind will swing to the other side. And also when you're over there chasing, you'll get exhausted. You'll get really tired in life. But in this middle way, you can pursue this endlessly because you can have sustainable motivation, ambition, and enthusiasm. But this comes from wise decision making rather than, oh, I want that new house and I want to show my friends that I'm rich and I'm successful, or I want to buy that new car so I can drive around and show off to everybody how great of a car that I have. That's the craving, desire, attachment in the ego that is motivating that. But that burns out and it leads to unwise decisions where you can come to the middle and you're like, you know what? I just need transportation. That's all I need is transportation. And now you can make wise decisions to be able to acquire that transportation. And it's not about showing off to people. So your motivation comes from wise decisions. This is why the Buddha was able to teach from the time of 35 to 80. Because he didn't do it based in craving. Whereas if he did it based in craving, that would have burnt out and he would have given up. But instead, he was teaching based on wise decisions. So that's why he could do it sustainably for the rest of his life. In fact, his very last words were a teaching. He actually was continuing to teach all the way to his last breath because it was based on wise decisions, knowing that these teachings were beneficial for people. So the mind doesn't know how to do this because pursuing things as a goal, objective, or interest, the mind doesn't know what that means because it can see this chasing really clearly and it can see this dull, lethargic state very clearly, but it can't see this middle. That's what a Buddha helps you to be able to see. So if you have goals that you're pursuing, and if you get that goal, you're happy, and if you don't get the goal, you're angry or sad, that's not a goal. That's a craving, desire, attachment. That's a central desire masquerading as a goal. A true goal, you can work your way towards it with ambition and enthusiasm, and you can maintain your peace and joy whether you attain it or not. So you're not attaching your feelings to whether or not you get this goal or not. So you could be 80% of your way to the goal, and you could say, I haven't met this goal. You know what? I could extend my timeline here, give me some more time to get this goal. Or I could add more resources in order to be able to help me accomplish this goal. Or, you know what, 80% is just fine. I don't need to go any further. I can be just fine with the 80%. And now you can maintain your contentedness and your peacefulness. Whereas if you're chasing, you can only be happy if you get what you want. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, how to train your mind to not do that. But it doesn't appear very straightforward for someone who spent their entire life chasing. The mind doesn't know how to do that. How to maintain your happiness while you're pursuing goals, objectives, or interests through wise decision-making. This is something you need to learn and cultivate your mind and develop the wisdom of how to do that. And that's what the path is doing, helping you to be able to figure out this middle way more and more. And it's not instantaneous. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress that'll help you to get to that. Nobody else? You have a question? Yep.
So, in this path that like we are trying to reduce suffering, would you say that maybe embracing our human experience and accepting sadness, irritation, anger, frustration, all these feelings, instead of trying to eliminate them, would maybe lead us to increase? I'm confused. Increased or lowering suffering?
So oftentimes people use the word suffering. You'll see tomorrow that I don't use that word because the Buddha's word on this he used in the original text is dukkha. And this word translates to discontent, discontented, or discontentedness. What you're doing is you're eliminating the mind forming its feelings based on some condition. As long as you allow the mind to keep forming conditioned feelings, you will continue to experience them. So it's not about reducing suffering or reducing discontentedness. It's about eliminating it 100%. Because if you allow your mind to form conditioned feelings, then your mind's just going to keep going up and down and up and down. So say, for example, I get a brand new job, even though I don't work in the workforce anymore. I share the teachings with you guys. But let's just say I got a brand new job and I got so excited about that brand new job. That's a conditioned, pleasant feeling that based on the condition that I got this new job, I am now happy and excited. And I go to work each day at the beginning of the job and I'm so happy and so excited. And maybe that's the case for a few months or for a certain period of time, maybe a few years even. I'm so excited and happy about this job. Well, if I base my pleasant feelings, my happiness on this job, that means I can only be happy if I have this job. So now, because of impermanence and the world is full of change, when the company goes out of business or they lay me off or I get fired, now I'm going to be angry or sad or frustrated because the mind's craving this job to be permanent. And you can only be happy when you get what you want, which is this job. So it's not about reducing or the suffering. It's about completely eliminating it. And you need to be able to see that the conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a part of the problem as the painful ones. Because if you allow your mind to get conditional pleasant feelings, then it's only a matter of time before the painful ones come. And you don't have to keep experiencing these feelings over and over and over again. You don't have to accept the fact that as an unenlightened human being, you do experience anger, sadness, frustration, guilt, shame, stress, anxiety, and all these things. Because if you keep allowing your mind to form that feeling, then it's going to continue to stay wired that way. So the Buddha is teaching you how to retrain the mind where it no longer is wired to form its inner feelings based on something external. That if it's sunny outside, an individual will be happy. And then if it's raining, they'll be sad or frustrated. If you continue to allow your mind to form conditioned feelings, then it's only a matter of time before your mind's going up and down and up and down. So what the Buddha is teaching you how to do is have a cheerful, bright, glad, radiant, and uplifted mind all the time, where it's unconditioned, that there doesn't need to be any condition met in order to be able to have that uplifted and cheerful mind. So oftentimes when I'm describing enlightenment, people think that you're just numb or, you're emotionless. That's what people tend to think. But that's not the case. Your mind is cheerful and bright and glad and uplifted at all times, and there doesn't need to be any condition met. So an individual could choose to continue to stay in the unenlightened state and continue to experience stress and anxiety and anger and frustration. That's a choice that people can make. I would say that would be an unwise choice, But there's this other option that's available, which is getting to enlightenment, where the mind will be completely peaceful and joyful, cheerful, glad, and uplifted at all times. But you need to be able to train your mind to not form conditioned feelings, which is something that we're going to go into detail about tomorrow. So right now, you might not fully understand what it is that I'm sharing with you, but tomorrow when I teach the Four Noble Truths, you'll have more detail and be able to see it more clearly. All right. Let's see if we have any questions here online. I don't see any questions online here. Okay, I don't see any questions online. All right, so now let's go to the next 5, because these are 10 fetters. These are the higher fetters. And I'm going to talk about 6 and 7 together because they're very similar. Desire for form and desire for formless. What this is a desire to exist in the form realms like animal or human, or the formless realms like hell, afflicted spirits, or the heavenly realm. The form realms have physical form, and sometimes people can really crave and long and yearn to exist in one of those realms. I remember at one time in my life, I really had a longing, yearning to be a bird. I thought like, wow, wouldn't it be so great to be a bird and just be flying around the world and looking down at the world? That would be so cool to just fly around the world. That's a craving for form, that the mind was craving to exist in another form. Because the mind, in order to get to enlightenment, you need to be peaceful and joyful in the present moment, that your mind is not longing, yearning for something else. If I'm longing, yearning to exist as a bird, then that means that I'm not content and peaceful in the present moment in this existence as a human being. So craving for form or desire for form would be to have a desire to exist in either the animal realm or the human realm. Desire for formless is to have a desire to exist in either hell, afflicted spirits, which are the ghosts, or the heavenly realm. Now, most people that have this particular fetter, they might have a desire to exist in the heavenly realm. But there's also people who do have a desire to exist in the hell realm. Not too many, but there are people who have that. So if you have desire for form or desire for formless, it's desire to exist in another existence. And by the time you eliminate these, you will be completely content and peaceful in the present moment as you're eliminating all the 10 fetters. And you will have eliminated any fear of death. Sometimes people have fear of death. So by the time you eliminate these 2 fetters, you will no longer have any fear of death. Then there's something called conceit. What conceit is where the mind is measuring and comparing, thinking of yourself as being superior or inferior to other people. This is the mind's arrogance or pride. This is the ego, part of the mind's ego. So where this comes from is the mind's animal existences. When we were all in the animal world, we needed conceit. We wouldn't have been able to survive without conceit. We had this pecking order in our mind. And if we were a wolf and didn't understand who was the alpha female and the alpha male, we wouldn't have learned how to hunt and how to survive as a wolf. When we were a herd of elephants, if we didn't know who the matriarch of our herd was, we wouldn't have survived as an elephant, because we needed to know where the food was, where the migration paths are, where the watering holes are. We needed to know who was above us in the animal realm. And when we come into this human realm, the mind tends to do that. It wants this pecking order. If you've ever been to a social situation, maybe like a party or a gathering, people might stroll up to you and be like, "So what do you do?" And you might be like, "Oh, I'm a lawyer." "Oh, really? I'm a doctor," right? And then now there's this pecking order, this conceit where people are trying to measure and compare each other. Or maybe you're looking at other people's house or car and trying to compare yours to other people. This is going to hinder you from having harmonious relationships, because when you become arrogant and prideful, you're going to talk down to people in a certain way, but then also sometimes you'll put yourself below people too. When you go into your boss's office, you might be all shaken up by that, thinking that they're above you. Or maybe you meet a famous celebrity or a politician or something like this, and you're all shaken up around that person. So as long as you have conceit in the mind can't be permanently peaceful and joyful, because your mind's looking for this pecking order. And when you go into a social situation, you're trying to figure out who's above me and who's below me, because I'm going to talk to these people in one way and I'm going to talk to these people in another way. And what you would like to be able to do is just have one way of treating everybody. Because if your mind's having to constantly figure out who's above you and who's below you, and you need to talk to one group of people in one way, you talk to another group of people another way, your mind can't be permanently peaceful and permanently at ease. But you would like to get to the point where you don't have this conceit, where you view everybody as being equal. You see somebody who's sweeping the street outside and you say, hey, good morning, ma'am. Good morning, sir. How are you? Right? You see the king or the queen of Thailand walking down the street, which I don't think you'll see. But if you do, good morning, sir. Good morning, ma'am. How are you? Right? You treat everybody exactly the same. This is one of the reasons why your mind is at ease when you're in the enlightened mental state, because you're just treating everybody equally. You're not having this pecking order. So if you have ego or arrogance, people will push you aside because they don't like being around that. They're not interested in being around someone who thinks they're above them. Or if you put yourself below people and you're shaken up, people won't have confidence in you. When your boss sees that you're all shaken up, when you're around them, they won't have confidence in your ability to perform well at the job. And you'll see that it'll hinder you in forward progress in your career. So getting rid of this conceit is to help you just think about everybody as being equal. So if at any point you see your mind being conceitful, you need to be able to eliminate that and just look at yourself as being equal to everybody and not trying to put yourself above or below people. This is one of the fetters that I also spend time helping you guys to be able to learn, but here I'm just introducing you to it. Personal existence view and conceit is what we refer to as the ego. The word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha, so he rightfully describes it in these two different ways because the symptoms and the solutions are actually different from personal existence view to conceit, but we're actually combining it and calling it the ego. So as you progress on this journey, you'll get more and more guidance of how to eliminate the ego, because as long as you have this in your mind, you're not going to be able to be peaceful and joyful with all beings around you. Then there's something called restlessness. What this is the overactivity of the mind, the distraction, the confusion of the mind. If you've ever been somewhere and you're just kind of like bobbing your knee, or you're tapping your pencil or tapping your finger, you have this overactivity of the body, that's because the mind has restlessness, that it's overactive. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you're going to need to eliminate that, where the mind can just be completely peaceful and joyful. You don't have this ruminating of the mind over and over and over. And then the last one, this is the fetter of all fetters. It's referred to as ignorance, but I tend to not use this word. I only use it because other teachers use it. And if you ever study anywhere else, you know what they're talking about. But the better way to think about this is the unknowing of true reality, the lack of wisdom, the confusion, the misunderstanding. That because the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand, it continues to have these pollutions in the mind. So this is the mind needing to cultivate wisdom, that when you cultivate wisdom, you can eradicate these pollutions. So the mind is ignorant or lacking wisdom or unknowing of true reality of things like the three universal truths, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the natural law of karma, meditation training, all these different things that you're learning, the three unwholesome roots, the three fires, the natural law of karma, all these different things are things that the mind just doesn't understand what it doesn't understand. That's why when you're in a class like this, you're going to hear things that you don't quite understand when you first hear it. You're going to need to ask questions. You're going to need to be thinking about those things. You're going to need to ask further questions, because this unknowing of true reality is what's keeping the mind trapped in this unenlightened state. That's why your goal is to cultivate wisdom, because that's what counteracts the ignorance. And that's why by the time you get to enlightenment, your mind will be fully awake or wise, because now you've cultivated wisdom about the world around you. So this ignorance is the fetter of all fetters. It's the whole reason why the mind is actually in the unenlightened state, because it lacks wisdom. It doesn't even know that the 10 fetters exist prior to exposure from these teachings. So there's this lack of wisdom where the mind is just going around the world believing certain things rather than being able to see the truth through independent verification to be able to cultivate wisdom. So that's why everything on the path to enlightenment is all about the cultivation of wisdom. And that's why there's no rites, rituals, ceremonies, worship, or prayer that's going to help you to cultivate wisdom. So that's what's ultimately going to lead to your enlightenment, is the cultivation of wisdom And one of those things is wisdom about the 10 fetters. And there's so many other things that you're going to need to cultivate wisdom about as well. And that's why you don't believe the teachings. You learn, investigate, examine, you reflect, independently verify, and then you practice to be able to see the truth for yourself. So does anybody have any questions on these? Looks like, James, you have a question? It's on now. There you go. I think you just turned it off. When you press the button, just wait like 2 seconds, and then that's when it'll be there. Yeah, you press it. When you see the lights come on, you can let it go, but the lights will go off, but you just need to know that it's on. There you go.
So Webster defines ignorance as lack of knowledge. Talk to us about knowledge and wisdom.
Sure. So knowledge is like intellectually understanding something, but wisdom is having independently verified it and now making decisions through that wisdom. So for example, growing up, we had the knowledge that drugs and alcohol were unwise for us to take. We had that intellectual knowledge and that understanding, but we didn't have the wisdom of how unwise it is to take those drugs and alcohol, and that's why some of us chose to do that. So having knowledge just means that you intellectually understand something, but you don't have the wisdom yet because you haven't independently verified it and you haven't started making decisions through that wisdom. So that's what it means to have wisdom, is that you've independently verified it and you're now making decisions through that. So that's how you eradicate ignorance, is not just through the intellectual understanding of something. You actually eliminate your ignorance by actually making decisions through that intellectual understanding. And that's where you get to wisdom, is that now you're making decisions based in your understanding of the world around you. So if you just have an intellectual understanding of these teachings, you would never get to enlightenment. You actually need to have wisdom where you actually have reflected to independently verify the teachings, and you're actually practicing, meaning you're making decisions through that information, through that wisdom. So you can use this example of substances as a great example, because you can intellectually know that substances are unwise, but the mind still does it because there's ignorance or unknowing of true reality in the mind. There's not yet wisdom.
And when you speak of independent verification and wisdom, is that through experience?
Yes, the Buddha even refers to it that way. He calls it direct experience. So he can explain something to you. And now when I explain it, you'll see tomorrow, as I start teaching you, I'll start explaining things to you. And now you reflect on it, meaning you look at your own experience and say, is that what I'm experiencing? Right? And now you start practicing. So like when I say you get happy and excited when it's sunny outside, but that happiness is not permanent. When it rains, you then become sad and frustrated. You can look through your own direct experience and say, yeah, that's exactly what my mind's doing. Or I get really happy and excited when your bank account balance is here, and then when it goes here, you get sad and frustrated. You can see through your own direct experience that that's exactly what's occurring if you have that particular craving, desire, attachment in your mind. So that's why you don't believe when I'm giving you all these examples and all these different things that I'm teaching you. You look at your own life through your own direct experience. And that's where the reflection is happening. That's where the independent verification is happening. But then when you practice what it is that I'm sharing with you, and on a day-to-day basis, you're making decisions through what I'm sharing with you, that's where you cultivate the wisdom, because you've intellectually understood it through learning and examination. You've then reflected on it to verify it through your own life and what you've seen in the past. But now you start making decisions through that wisdom. And that's where you see the improvement to the condition of your life and the things that you experience, because now you're making decisions based in that wisdom. But the direct experience is what's helping you have kind of the evidence that this particular teaching that the Buddha is sharing is potentially true, because that's what you see through your own direct experience. But now when you practice his teachings, implementing them into your day-to-day life, that's where you know with 100% certainty that it's true. Mm-hmm. Other questions?
Trying to act about like ignorance or unknowing of true reality, and like impermanent world. So there's always like things that we'll never know because it's always changing, right? So, or that's just mostly just about elimination of the okay. So, I guess is it about being accepting that you'll never know everything, right? Or this is just more about the true reality of the mind or something.
In terms of the path to enlightenment, by the time you get to enlightenment, you will know everything about the path to enlightenment. In order to be able to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to know everything about the path to enlightenment, but you won't know everything in the world, right? So if you got to enlightenment, that doesn't mean you know how to fly a helicopter or fly an airplane, right? But if you've had training on how to fly a helicopter in a pilot, now as an enlightened being, you'll do that much, much better than you did as an unenlightened being. Because as an unenlightened being, it's easy to become confused or distracted. But as an enlightened being, you won't experience that confusion or distraction. So you'll actually do whatever it is that you're going to do in the world. You'll actually do it much better as an enlightened being because your mind is now performing optimally. But you won't know everything about the world in terms of flying airplanes and helicopters and things. But in terms of the natural laws, you will know those 100% by the time you get to enlightenment. No other questions? Okay. So as you're eliminating these pollutions of the mind, these fetters, you're moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment. They're referred to as the first, second, third, and fourth stage of enlightenment, but the Buddha referred to them in this way: the stream enterer, once returner, non-returner, and arahant. And you'll see why when I explain to you what these are. And then there's something called a Buddha, which is not a stage of enlightenment, but instead is a unique type of individual. So I'm going to help you guys to understand this. So what a stream enterer is someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment. And the Buddha referred to this person as a stream enterer because once you get to this first stage of enlightenment, it's only a matter of time before you actually get to enlightenment, either in this life or some future life. You will have accomplished this through eliminating the first 3 fetters of personal existence view, doubt, and wrong behavior and observances. Just like a log enters the stream and is going to eventually get to the ocean, the same thing is true that once you enter into the stream, meaning you've gotten into the first stage of enlightenment, you will get to enlightenment. It's only a matter of time. And in this stage of enlightenment, you will have significantly reduced your discontentedness. Whatever type of anger, frustration, or irritation, or any of those other feelings that you had prior to this, you will have significantly reduced it. It will be just a mere fraction of what it once was. So you will have eliminated these first 3 fetters. And that's why you don't have any doubt by that point, because you've seen significant improvement by the time you get to this first stage of enlightenment. Then there's the second stage of enlightenment called a once returner. It's referred to this way because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will come back into the world one more time and you will then get to enlightenment in that next life. Right? Where the stream enterer, if you die in that stage of enlightenment, you will come back a maximum of 7 times. It could be 1 more time, 3 more times, 6 more times, but no more than 7. But in this second stage of enlightenment, if you make your way to that and you die, then you will come back into the world one more time and you will get to enlightenment in that next life. So some of you guys could have been a stream enterer or once returner in a previous life, and now is your opportunity to be able to get to enlightenment in this life. So an individual who's in the second stage of enlightenment, they would have already eliminated the first 3 fetters, but then they would have thinned out number 4 and 5. Thinning out a fetter means that it's not as strong as it once was. If you think about maybe for some of you guys, maybe when you were younger, you had a very strong sexual drive perhaps, and now maybe as you age, maybe that's kind of diminished a bit. That's what it means to thin out a particular fetter. Or maybe you were really angry and hostile and bitter in your teenage years, and now as you've aged, maybe that's kind of decreased a little bit. That doesn't mean you're in the second stage of enlightenment at this point, but I'm just helping you to understand what it means to thin out a fetter, is that it's not as pronounced and it's not as strong as it once was. So these are the first 2 stages of enlightenment. Then there's the third stage. As a third stage of enlightenment, this is called a non-returner, because if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you will not come back to the human realm, but instead you will be reborn into the heavenly realm and you will attain enlightenment in that existence. Now, I understand that you guys haven't independently verified the cycle of rebirth in these 5 realms of existence yet, but just understand what I'm teaching you here. It is the truth, but you're just not at a point where you can independently verify this right now at this point, and I understand that. An individual who's gotten to this 3rd stage of enlightenment has eliminated the first 5 fetters, the lower fetters. And at this point in time, you're experiencing discontentedness very infrequently. And when it's occurring, it's very insignificant. Maybe once every 2 months, once every 3 to 4 months, that you're experiencing just a little bit of discontentedness. And the people around you probably don't even know that you're discontent. It's just inwardly within your own mind, you're experiencing some discontentedness. You're not outwardly discontent. So in this stage of enlightenment, sometimes people can become a little bit complacent because practice to continue to work on the remaining fetters. So each one of these stages, you're going to see a significant decrease in your discontentedness and what you're experiencing. By the time you get to the 4th stage of enlightenment, referred to as an arahant, you would have eliminated all the 10 fetters. The mind is completely purified, and now this individual is enlightened. We would refer to this type of person as an enlightened being, where during the lifetime of the Buddha, he referred to them as an arahant, meaning they fully purified their mind. So this individual, if you die in this stage of enlightenment, you're not going to be reborn at any of the realms of existence. You're outside of the cycle of rebirth. You will notice that your mind is in this stage of enlightenment when you're experiencing 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. There's no discontentedness whatsoever, not even the slightest little ickiness in the mind. You'll know that your mind is actually enlightened at that point. So by that point, you will have completely purified your mind of all the 10 fetters. So these are the 4 stages of enlightenment. And then there's something called a Buddha. A Buddha meets those 3 criteria that we were talking about previously, that they get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. They then dedicate the rest of their life to sharing their independently discovered teachings with countless people, and countless people will get to enlightenment during their lifetime. They will then preserve their teachings in such a way that countless more people will get to enlightenment after their death. But there's also these other criteria as well. They will have a profound memory. Even in the unenlightened state, an individual who's going to become a Buddha, they have a deep, profound memory. And when they get to enlightenment, it only enhances. Where a Buddha has an unlimited capacity to remember countless details about their current life and their previous lives as well. And that's how they actually get to enlightenment without the help of any teachers or any guides, because they accumulate all that wisdom to apply it in their last life. Where an average human being, like say for you, for example, you have a limited capacity where it's like a hard drive on a computer. Maybe you have 500 gigabytes or 1 terabyte. And when you get to capacity, you've got to delete old files in order to store new files. That's why when you think about your childhood, you just have spotty memories about what it is that you did in your childhood. Where in the last 5 years or so, you can pretty much remember everything that you've been up to in the last 5 or 10 years. But your childhood, you just have spotty memories because you've had to delete those files in order to store new files. Where an individual who's a Buddha, they don't have that. They can remember countless details about their current life and their past lives as well. And this is what allows them to actually get to enlightenment by themselves without the help of any teachers or any guides. Not only do they have a profound memory, but they can quickly determine the condition of someone else's mind through spending time with that person, and then they can offer them teachings that are going to help them to progress on the path to enlightenment. But they only do this with their students to be able to help them. They don't just go to people in an unsolicited way and start saying, by the way, you have ego and you need to eliminate that, or by the way, you have this fitter of ill will and you need to eliminate that. They wouldn't do that. That would be their own ego. And a Buddha doesn't have ego. So they have this ability to observe the quality of individuals' minds, but they only share teachings with people who are sincerely interested to learn and grow and develop on the path. So this is one of the qualities of a Buddha. And then lastly, a Buddha is a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. Whatever it is that they teach, they also practice those same things, because that's how their students are learning. That their students are learning just as much through their spoken words as they are through their actions. That a Buddha is going to be a living, breathing, walking example of their teachings. So if they're teaching to be polite, kind, friendly, respectful to people, they're going to also be practicing those same things too, so that their students can actually learn through their actions, not just through their spoken words. So these are the criteria of what make a Buddha a Buddha. And this is a very rare type of individual in the world. The last Buddha that the world's currently aware of existed over 2,500 years ago. We refer to this type of individual not only as a Buddha, but as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. Because by the time this individual gets to enlightenment, what they know about the path to enlightenment is the path to enlightenment. They understand the path to enlightenment inside and out, backwards and forwards. So they've gotten to enlightenment by themselves, and then they dedicate the rest of their life to sharing those teachings. So they're essentially illuminating the path to enlightenment for countless people to be able to see clearly what it takes to actually get to enlightenment. And if they tried a certain meditation and they realize that it didn't work to help them to get to enlightenment, they will discard it. They will no longer practice that meditation. So by the time they get to enlightenment, they don't have any extra baggage in their mind regarding the path to enlightenment. So that's why we call them a fully, perfectly enlightened one. Where someone else who's gotten to enlightenment, who they learned from someone who's not a Buddha, they will still have maybe 5 or 10% of things in their mind that didn't lead to their enlightenment, but they're still actually doing those things because out of maybe respect for their teacher. So by the time that person gets to enlightenment, they're enlightened. They're experiencing the same qualities that the mind is peaceful and joyful and all those other qualities, but they still have some extra baggage around. That's why we don't refer to an average enlightened being as a fully, perfectly enlightened one. But a Buddha is going to be a fully, perfectly enlightened one, that they don't have this extra baggage because they don't have any teachers or guides. What they know about the path is the true path to enlightenment and exactly how to get to this enlightened mental state. So do you guys have any questions on these 4 stages of enlightenment or what a Buddha is? No questions? Okay. So what I'm going to do here is just wrap this up by sharing with you what enlightenment is not. This is going to help you to understand what enlightenment is. That what enlightenment is not, the best way to know that your mind is not enlightened is that you'll still experience discontent feelings. This is where I don't use the word suffering, but I use the word discontentedness because there's these 3 feelings that are conditioned feelings. That there's this happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. That's very pleasant for the mind to experience. Then there's painful feelings that are neither painful nor pleasant. Also, there's painful and neither painful nor pleasant. So sometimes when I share this, people are like, hold on a second, David. If I get to enlightenment, I'm not going to be experiencing happiness. Well, the answer is you're not going to be able to experience conditional happiness. You're going to be experiencing unconditioned happiness, where in the unenlightened state, you can only be happy if certain conditions are met. If the weather is this, if my mom and dad does this, if my brothers and sisters do this, if my boss does this, if I have this kind of house, this kind of car, if I have this much money in my bank account, then I'll be happy, right? So your ability to be happy actually shrinks when you have conditional happiness because you can only be happy when these things are met, when these things are true. What you're doing is you're training your mind to get beyond this, where your mind can actually be happy all the time. If it's sunny outside or if it's raining, you can still be happy. If your bank account balance is here or it's here, you can still be happy. Your happiness isn't contingent upon these impermanent things in the world. So an enlightened being is experiencing unconditioned happiness and unconditioned joy. But an unenlightened being will have conditional feelings that are pleasant, painful, and neither painful nor pleasant. That based on some condition, the mind is then going to experience a feeling. But you can get beyond that. And that's what it means to end suffering or eliminate suffering, is you're eliminating the mind's conditioned feelings, that your mind's no longer going up and down in that manner, forming conditioned feelings. You'll understand this more when we talk tomorrow about the Four Noble Truths. If you have a craving for other people to know that you're enlightened, you're not yet enlightened. So one of the best ways to know that someone's not enlightened is they're going to tell you that they're enlightened. So if somebody walks up to you and they're like, hey, by the way, James, don't tell anybody I'm enlightened, right? You know that that person's not enlightened. That's the ego. That's the arrogance. That's the pride. It's like, okay, well, if you're so enlightened, then why are you coming around here telling us about it? Go be enlightened. Go be peaceful. Go be joyful. What do you want? You want us to bow down to you? You want us to admire you? What is it that you want that you're coming around and telling people that you're enlightened? So an enlightened being isn't going to go around and be boastful and arrogant in trying to prove to people that they're enlightened, because that would be the mind's craving, and that would be the mind's ego. And the mind in the enlightened mental state doesn't have that. You can just walk with wisdom and a smile. You don't need to convince people that you're enlightened by the time you get to enlightenment. Then if you have complacency in your mind, where you're lacking motivation and enthusiasm and ambition, a willingness to do something, you're lacking initiative, then you know your mind is not yet enlightened, because that's the mind swinging back and forth. That it's either going to chase, or it's going to swing over here and it's going to be dull and lethargic, complacent and lazy. And you'll know that your mind is not yet enlightened. An enlightened being is going to have energy. It's going to have vigor, vitality. There's going to be ambition and enthusiasm to move forward in life. So this is how you know that your mind is not enlightened. And that's actually going to help you to be able to understand what enlightenment is. So any questions on any of this? No questions? Okay. So it's about 12:15, and this is where we can take our lunch break. We can take a full hour and a half lunch break, because what I have to teach you this afternoon, I can still teach it from 1:45 to 3 o'clock. So if you guys would like to take a full hour and a half and then come back at 1:45, I'm going to teach you Buddhist chanting. I'll teach you the history of it. I'm going to teach you how to do it and why we do it, what the benefits of it are, and then we'll actually incorporate it into our meditation and show you guys how to do that. So whatever you guys do for lunch, enjoy. I know some of you guys might not be coming back for the afternoon session. That's a choice for you guys to make. There'll be recordings, so if you guys would like to watch it in the another time, you're more than welcome to do that. But this afternoon at 1:45, I'll teach you guys the Buddhist chanting. So thank you guys for your questions and your interest to learn. Perhaps I'll see you guys after lunch. Okay? Thank you so much.